In our previous episode, we detailed the fall of Minas Tirith, the beginning of the quest for the jewel, and the tragic death of Finrod Felagund at the hand of the Dark Lord's most capable lieutenant. Yet this would not be the end of the tale of Beren and Luthien, for as long as even a fool's hope remained, they would strive ever onwards to ensure they could someday find solace in each other's arms for the woes unmatched they had been and would yet be forced to endure. The consequences of their quest were to be far-reaching, such as the foundation of the Union of Maethros, right down to inspiring the love of a certain Aragorn, son of Arathorn, and Arwen, daughter of Elrond, during the Third Age of Middle-earth. Those of you into tabletop gaming likely have seen many a world-changing quest like this, but you've probably never gazed upon the beauty of the Silmarils in real life, have you? Alas, we'll probably never get to experience it, but we can offer some fine human craftsmanship from our sponsor, Wormwood, who are collaborating with Dispel to bring you the Elemental Collection. This is a chance to get unique dice and dice vaults themed after the 6 elements: water, fire, foliage, geode, space, and lightning. Choose your element, and then pick between either iconic or iridescent dice and an ebony or cherry dice vault. The iconic dice are double casted, so that small details can be added for a complex look, and the iridescent dice have a special coating that changes their sheen based on viewing angle. The vaults come with hand inlays or laser illustrations with original designs based on your chosen element. These beautiful dice and vaults are only available from the 14th of December to the 25th, and you can get them via the Kickstarter we have linked in the description. So don't miss out on this chance to add some marvelous pieces from the Elemental Collection to your tabletop. In order to capture Luthien, Sauron sent all of his werewolves, including their great sire Dagor-nuin, yet Huan would not yield before them. The great Hound of the Valar gave not an inch, and slaughtered each and every assailant who came to take the woman he so deeply adored. Sauron watched on as his servants were brought low by the Hound, and knew that the situation would require his own intervention. The future Dark Lord took the form of a great and formidable wolf as he engaged Huan in combat. Yet even he could not defeat the Hound of the Valar, and was forced to yield the island. This left Tolin Gaohoth in the hands of Luthien, who cleared the taint of the land and freed Beren. The pair then buried Finrod and left the island behind them. Unfortunately, now that the danger had seemingly dissipated, the ever-loyal Huan had to return to his master Celegorm, depriving them of a formidable ally in the struggle to come. Yet his loyalty was to be tested, as Celegorm and Curufin crossed paths with Beren and Luthien near the forest of Brethil. They aimed to kill Beren and take Luthien captive. However, Huan was unwilling to allow such a foul act to be committed. Beren then took from Curufin his horse and knife, Angrist, and gave him permission to return to his people humbled. Yet the malice of Curufin remained, and he took from his brother his bow and fired upon Luthien, forcing Beren to dive before the arrow. Beren was wounded and was about to be killed, but Huan drove off the brothers. He also brought with him a herb that Luthien used to save the life of her love. Following that, they returned to Doriath. In Doriath, Beren entrusted the life of Luthien to the guardianship of Huan, as he knew he had to return to the north to finish his quest of taking the Silmarils from the Dark Lord Morgoth. He now believed this would be his final act, and as such, he sang the farewell song of parting, yet aid came unbidden as Huan and Luthien returned to his side. Huan spoke for only the second time, stating that Beren would no longer be able to save Luthien from her fate. From the shadow of death you can no longer save Luthien, for by her love she is now subject to it. So he allowed her to accompany him further, as they took upon themselves the guise of Dagor-nuin and the bat-like messenger of Sauron, known as the Ringwithil, to pass through the Anfalglith without being accosted. As the pair reached the very gates of Angband, weary beyond belief, a previously unknown threat lay before them. Following the retreat of the elves from the Ard Gullen, a venomous new warden had been placed before the fortress, a wolf of immense proportions, Carcharoth, also called the Red Maw, who had already heard news of Dagor-nuin's demise, and hence was suspicious of the pair. Yet Luthien, through her magic, was able to command the wolf to sleep, and the duo was able to descend to the very depths of Angband before coming face to face with the Dark Lord in his throne room. This hall, patrolled by Balrogs, was filled with horrors never witnessed before by the eyes of the Free Peoples, and the very strength of the gaze of Morgoth robbed Luthien of her disguise. Yet Luthien's courage shone through once more, as she was undaunted by the vile horrors which she now faced, and instead of cowering beneath the weight of her doom, she offered to sing for the Dark Lord. As she evaded his sight, she began to sing a piece of such unimaginable beauty and blinding power that Morgoth was forced to dream of the void, and alongside the rest of his court, fell into a deep, darkened slumber. Beren recognized what must be done, and put aside his disguise, taking from its sheath the blade of the son of Feanor, Angrist, and taking from Morgoth's crown a Silmaril. Yet this mere man deigned that if he could garner a single Silmaril, he could bring with him all three. His very blade was to betray him, however. Angrist snapped with a sharp fragment of the finely wrought blade striking the cheek of the Dark Lord, which caused him to arouse and awaken the legions of Angband from their slumber. The gravity of their situation became clear to Beren and Luthien immediately, which caused them to flee with all haste to the surface. Yet they had merely left the frying pan and emerged instantly into the flame, as Carcharoth, who was created to take on the Hound of the Valar Huan, was now awake and furious at the deception of Luthien. Beren attempted to drive him off using the light of the Silmaril, which momentarily tempered his rage with a sliver of fear. Yet this was not to last, as the blackened spirit of the beast drove him once more into a rage. Carcharoth grasped the right hand of Beren within his great maw, severing it and consuming the Silmaril. This seared the innards of the mighty wolf, and he fled south, emitting such howls of madness as to drive fear into the heart of any of the Free Peoples he was to encounter. According to our chronicler, so terrible did he become in his madness that all the creatures of Morgoth that abode in that valley fled far away, for he slew all living things that stood in his path, and burst from the north with ruin upon the world. Carcharoth was designed as such a beast of chaos and ruin that his very fangs were laced with a potent and fatal venom, which left Beren mortally wounded. The quest, it seemed, was to end in heartbreak and despair. Yet unbidden came Thorondor with his eagles, and from the blackened skies of the Anfalglith, they saved the duo from the grasps of the legions of Angband. They bore Beren and Luthien south, passing above the glimmering jewel of the hidden city of Gondolin. Yet even this heartening sight could not assuage Luthien's despair for the imminent passing of the great love of her life. The eagles left the pair in the glade where they had first met in Doriath, and Huan came once more to their side. There they tended the son of Barahir, as he lay racked by dreams of such pain and anguish that a lesser man would have been taken by them. But as the despair of Luthien reached its apex, the eyes of Beren fluttered open, and he unexpectedly awoke. The name Ō'hÁinle, which meant the one-handed in Sindarin, was bestowed upon the most valorous of men. There they dwelt for a time in such happiness and joy, yet Beren could not set aside his oath to Thingol, and he returned Luthien to his father. News of their return had spread far and wide in the interim, so therefore, upon their arrival in Menegroth, they had garnered a sizable welcome. They recounted the tales of adversity and woe which had befallen them since they had initially departed. Astonished by the perseverance and strength a mere man had displayed in the face of an impossible task, Thingol softened in his attitude towards the son of Barahir. Now he held it in his thoughts that no power of elf or man, Maiar, Valar, or any other such being upon the face of Arda could stand between the fate of his daughter and this man of Dorthonion. Before the very throne of her father, Beren took the hand of Luthien, and all seemed to be well for a time, yet their peace and joy were not to last. For from the north came the howling Carcharoth, the Red Moor, as he devastated the lands he made his way through. As he was empowered by the Silmaril of Feanor, even the girdle of Melian could not prevent his entry into Doriath. A party was assembled to confront the foul beast, before he brought ruin and devastation upon the land that Thingol, as king, had sworn to defend. The company consisted of Huan, captain of the March Warden Rangers Mablung, chief of March Warden Rangers Beleg Strongbow, Beren and Thingol himself. As they rode out to meet with a being of such immense power that the outcome of any encounter remained firmly upon a knife's edge, a great darkness fell upon the heart of Luthien, who now saw all colour, beauty and life drained from the world. Near the northern waterfalls of Escalduin, the party met with the Great Wolf. Carcharoth launched his immense frame upon the king, yet Beren placed himself between Thingol and the taker of his right hand. In doing so, he saved the King of Doriath's life, but was mortally wounded himself. The Great Wolf was eventually slain by Huan. However, the Great Hound of the Valar gave his own life in the process, bidding a fond farewell to his dear friend Beren. Following this morose parting, Mablung ripped open the stomach of the wolf and took from Carcharoth the Silmaril, placing it in the one remaining hand of the son of Barahir. Beren turned to look Thingol in the eye and bade him take from him the Silmaril. The king eventually acquiesced, and Beren uttered his last words. "Now the quest is achieved, and my doom full wrought." The survivors of the party brought his body back to Menegroth, and Luthien came forth to meet the company. She now felt grief unequalled, and asked of her love to wait for her beyond the Western Sea, and despite his dire condition, his eyes fluttered open once more so that he could look upon her one last time. With his death, the quest for the Silmaril was at an end, yet the tale of Beren and Luthien was yet to reach its final conclusion. Beren's spirit lingered within the Hall of Mandos, in the hope that he may one day yet see Luthien upon the dimmest shores of the Outer Sea, so that he could bestow upon her one final farewell. From those shores the spirits of all men were to depart the world never to return, as was the necessity of the gift of Iluvatar. Heartbroken beyond all belief, the very spirit of Luthien left her body and made its way to the halls of Mandos, where she knelt before the Valar themselves and sang a song of such woe and sorrow so as to move even Mandos to pity. Yet even with the power afforded to him, Mandos could not alter the fates of the children of Iluvatar, so he turned to Manwë, who further sought the counsel of Iluvatar, so moved was he by the plight of Beren and Luthien. This council allowed two choices to Luthien. For her valour, the extraordinary nature of the labours she had achieved throughout her lifetime, and the grief she had been forced to bear throughout, she could be permitted to stay in Valinor. There, all of her pain and sorrow, which she had endured throughout her life, would be forgotten. There was one important caveat for this option, however. Beren could not follow her along such a path. The second option would be a return to Middle-earth with Beren, where she would live out a mortal life with no guarantee of joy. They would both be subject to a second death following the end of their mortal lives. Despite this, she chose to face such a second brush with death for the sake of Beren. In doing so, she forsook the Undying Lands, and so it came to be that Luthien Tineville and Beren would live out a mortal life together as the fairest of the elves forsook her gift of immortality for the love of a man. Soon after this exceptional decision on Luthien's part, which had been taken in the aftermath of the return of a Silmaril, word reached Maethros of their quest. In an act that none of the sons of Feanor had up until this point been able to replicate, Maethros had become convinced that Morgoth was far from the invincible foe they had once imagined him to be. This brought hope to the fiercest of the sons of Feanor, who now believed it possible to end for good and all the domination of Morgoth. This alliance of the great houses of the Elves and Edain would come to be known as the Union of Maethros. Yet despite the hopes which had inspired its creation, the union was to bring naught more than unnumbered tears, as the doom of Mandos promised to Feanor could not be so easily overturned, even in the face of a united front of the finest of both elf and man. However, this is the story for our next documentary on the history of the First Age. The next few videos in this series will be dedicated to the continued battles of the War of the Jewels. But we're planning to cover the battles of many other fantasy, sci-fi and space opera universes, so make sure you have subscribed and pressed the bell button. Please consider liking and sharing, as it helps immensely. And don't forget to comment. We'll try to read and respond to every comment, as we want to know what you think about this video and which videos you hope to see in the future. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.